They thought you'd chase them. They thought you'd crumble, break, or start explaining yourself one last time. But instead, you went silent. And that silence, it wasn't emptiness, it was discipline, it was control, it was the sound of someone who finally understood their own worth. In a world where people scream to be heard, your quiet became louder than any voice in the room. They couldn't understand it, because your silence wasn't confusion, it was clarity. It wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. You see, people are addicted to noise. They crave validation, attention, conflict as they speak before they think. They act before they feel. And when you stop playing their game, you became unpredictable, mysterious, untouchable. They expected a reaction, because reactions are what feed them. But you learned that silence starves everything that drains you. You learned that stillness is not the absence of power, it's the concentration of it. And in that quiet, you finally met yourself. There's something sacred that happens when you stop talking and start observing. You begin to notice things you were blind to before. How certain people only loved you when you were useful. How some conversations were never meant to heal. How much of your peace you were trading for the illusion of being understood. Epictetus once said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." And for the first time, you decided you would have no masters. The moment you stopped reacting, you reclaimed your freedom, because silence isn't running away. It's rising above. It's saying, "I see what's happening, but I choose peace instead of chaos." They thought your silence was weakness, but in reality, it was control. Control over your mind, your emotions, your destiny. Marcus Aurelius. The emperor who ruled an empire yet mastered his mind, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You finally understood that. You realized the only thing you truly own is your reaction. Everything else, their words, their opinions, their actions, none of it belongs to you. So why waste your energy fighting what isn't yours to control? But when you walk away without explanation, they call you cold. They say you've changed, but that's because you no longer feed their need for drama. You no longer serve their chaos. You no longer give them the comfort of your attention. Silence is not absence, it's presence on a higher level. It's standing so tall in your own peace that the noise below can't reach you, and yet this isn't easy. Silence is heavy. It's lonely sometimes, because when you stop talking, you start feeling. You begin to hear your own thoughts, the truth that words often drown out. You begin to face the ache, the disappointment, the memories you buried under endless conversations. But that's the beauty of silence. It purifies. It burns away illusions. It leaves you with what's real. You used to think that explaining yourself would fix things. You used to think if you just spoke from the heart, people would finally understand you. But some people don't want to understand you. They want to win. And once you see that, you stop wasting your breath. Your silence isn't a punishment, it's protection. It's choosing peace over validation, wisdom over impulse, freedom over approval. The world will test that choice. It will throw distractions, insults, and temptations at you. It will whisper, "Don't you care?" But care doesn't mean chasing, it means knowing when to stop. There's a quote by Seneca, "He who is brave is free." Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to let go, to let time speak instead of your tongue. And So you stopped sending the message. You stopped rewriting the same explanations. You stopped arguing for your value because you finally understood those who see. Your worth don't need convincing, and those who don't see it never will. Your silence started teaching. It became the mirror others couldn't escape. In your absence, they started replaying everything. The tone they used, the words they said, the things they took for granted. They started to realize that your quiet wasn't weakness, it was consequence. You didn't slam doors, you simply walked out with grace. You didn't curse them, you blessed them by no longer participating in their chaos. You didn't announce your peace, you lived it. And that's what they didn't expect, because they thought power meant control over others. But you learned power is control over yourself. They thought closure came from conversations, but you learned closure comes from understanding. They thought silence meant defeat, but you knew it meant freedom. Every time you resist the urge to prove yourself, you strengthen your inner fortress. Every time you stay calm when someone tries to provoke you, you build another layer of peace. Every time you remain silent when gossip spreads, you protect your dignity from being dragged into mud. You became dangerous, not because you fought louder, but because you stopped fighting altogether. You started choosing your battles, and most of them weren't worth fighting. They'll never admit it. But your silence taught them more than your words ever did. It forced them to face their reflection, and to sit with the discomfort of what they did. To realize that not everyone will argue back, and that's when true accountability begins. Yutajun are not responsible for their lessons. You are responsible for your peace, and peace demands boundaries. You can love someone deeply and still walk away quietly. You can care and still choose distance. You can forgive without explaining your forgiveness, because silence can carry love just as deeply as it carries strength. But it isn't you. Learned that you don't owe closure to anyone who broke your peace. You don't owe explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't owe words to those who only listen to reply. What you owe is respect to yourself, to your peace, to your growth. And when you finally gave yourself that respect, you realized something miraculous. You didn't need them to see your worth anymore, because you saw it. The storms outside you no longer dictated the calm within you. You could watch the chaos and stay still. You could hear the noise and not answer, because silence had become your shield. There's a moment every strong soul experiences, a turning point where they stop being reactive and start being reflective. That was your moment, the moment you decided not every battle deserves your sword. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful strike you can make. So you did, and they felt it. The messages stopped coming, the calls went unanswered, the games they played had no opponent anymore, and suddenly they were alone with themselves. That's when they realized your silence wasn't an absence, it was a consequence. People fear silence because it exposes what noise hides. It shows the truth beneath the talk. And when you stay quiet long enough, you begin to see everything clearly. Who's genuine, who's pretending, who values your energy, who drains it. Your silence is not passive, it's powerful. It's the space where you heal, the ground where you rebuild, the calm where you reconnect with your purpose. You don't need to announce your peace, you just need to live it. And when you do, people feel it. They may not say it, but they notice. They feel the absence of your chaos, the weight of your silence. the dignity of your restraint, and eventually they respect it, even if they never admit it. Because deep down, everyone knows the one who stays calm in the storm is the one who truly understands its nature. The more you remain silent, the more you learn. You start hearing things words could never teach you, the sound of your own breathing, the rhythm of your own patience, the whisper of your own intuition. You begin to trust your inner voice again. You begin to listen to what your peace has been trying to tell you all along. That not everything lost is a loss. That letting go doesn't mean giving up, it means growing up. That silence doesn't mean weakness, it means wisdom. One day, you'll look back and realize that your silence was the beginning of your rebirth. You were never rejecting them, you were returning to yourself. And when people ask you why you're so calm now, why you don't react, why you smile when others expect you to break, you'll simply say, I learned the value of peace the hard way. No anger, no bitterness, just clarity. Because silence is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of your power. Silence changes you. Not in an instant, but slowly, like water shaping stone. At first, it feels heavy. You want to speak, to explain, to prove you were right. Your mind replays every word you could have said, every argument you could have won. But as days pass, something shifts. You stop needing to win. You start to feel a strange calm in saying nothing. And that calm becomes addictive. You begin to notice how noise drains you. How every unnecessary conversation costs you peace. How every reaction steals seconds of your life you'll never get back. You start to see how much energy you've wasted trying to convince people who never wanted to understand you in the first place. That's when you realize your silence is not empty, it's full of understanding, it's full of lessons, it's full of strength. You see the world differently now. Where others rush to speak, you pause. Where others react, you breathe. And in that small moment of stillness, you gain what they lose, control. You no longer rush to reply to disrespect. You no longer argue when misunderstood. Because deep down, you've learned that silence embarrasses the loud far more than words ever could. You've discovered that silence is not passive, it's strategic. It's the space where truth reveals itself without you having to force it. The Stoics used to say, if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. That's how you live now, measured, grounded, calm. And yet, silence isn't always easy. There are moments it feels unbearable, when every part of you wants to break it, when anger burns behind your ribs, screaming to be released. But then you remember your peace is expensive, and silence is how you protect it. So you breathe through the fire. You let it burn without acting on it. And in doing so, you discover your own strength. Because strength isn't in lifting weights or raising your voice. It's in mastering your impulses when your ego is screaming for attention. It's in sitting still while your emotions beg you to explode. That is what real growth looks like. When you no longer dance to the rhythm of chaos, when you've learned that the world's noise doesn't deserve your symphony. Your silence now speaks in a language only peace can understand. It says, I'm done trying to prove myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. It says, my calm isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It says, I've grown beyond needing validation. There's a moment when every strong person remembers When you finally stop chasing explanations, you stop sending messages, you stop waiting for replies, you simply let the silence do the talking. And when that moment comes, you feel something powerful. It's not pride, it's not arrogance, it's liberation. Because silence doesn't just protect your peace, it reintroduces you to yourself. It reminds you that you were never powerless. You just gave your power to the wrong people for too long. Now, you understand that not every connection deserves closure. Some people only understand your value when your silence replaces your presence. Some lessons only bloom when you stop, watering what was already dead. That's what silence teaches you. To stop forcing conversations that destroy your spirit. To stop proving your loyalty where it's questioned. To stop fighting battles that don't bring peace. And maybe that's what scares them most. Not that you stop talking, but that you no longer need it. Two, they can't read you anymore. They can't predict you. They can't control you, because silence is unpredictable. It forces people to sit with their own thoughts. It exposes intentions. It creates a mirror they can't escape. In the quiet, they start remembering every word they said, every action they justified. And slowly, your silence starts to haunt them, because silence is not the absence of communication. It's the presence of consequence. They expected you to come back. They expected your pride to fade. But you never returned, because peace became your home. Now, when they talk about you, they'll mention how calm you were, how nothing could shake you anymore, how your silence said more than 1,000 explanations ever could. You've become the living example of what Stoicism truly means. To be unbothered not because you feel nothing, but because you've learned that reacting to everything steals everything. The old you would have sent a long message. The new you just whispers to yourself, let it be. And that's enough. Because silence is not about winning the argument. It's about refusing to participate in one that no longer serves your growth. Now, your silence has turned into your signature. It's how you move through the world. It's your way of saying, I choose peace. And one day, when they finally understand what your silence meant, it will be too late. Because by then, you'll be too far, too healed, and too free to look back. You'll smile, not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because you'll finally realize you didn't lose them. You lost your need to be understood by them. And that is the loudest silence of all. Silence has a strange way of revealing what words once hid. At first, it feels uncomfortable and almost unnatural, like holding your breath underwater. Your mind screams to speak, to defend, to explain. But something inside whispers, don't. So you don't. You hold your ground, you breathe through the storm, and in that space between impulse and action, you meet yourself for the first time. You begin to understand that silence isn't weakness, it's awareness. It's the moment your soul stops begging the world to listen and starts listening to itself. You realize that every time you argued, every time you explained yourself, you were giving a piece of your peace away to people who never planned to understand you anyway. Because understanding requires intention, and some people only listen to reload. Your silence becomes your filter. It separates the ones who truly value your energy from the ones who only value your reaction. And the longer you stay silent, the clearer the picture becomes. You start seeing patterns. You see how some people feed off your emotional response, how they feel powerful when you defend yourself, and lost when you don't. That's the power of silence. It starves manipulation. It makes emotional games fall apart. Because silence doesn't play. When you stop responding, you take away the control they thought they had. They can't twist your words. They can't provoke your anger. They can't manipulate your guilt. They're left alone with themselves, their thoughts, and the echo of what they did. And in that echo, the truth starts to sound louder than your voice ever could. They remember the things they said. They start replaying how you looked when you stopped reacting. They start realizing that your silence wasn't indifference. It was understanding. You understood everything. You just didn't feel the need to announce it. There's something sacred about that kind of restraint. It's a strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real. It's the quiet power of someone who knows their worth too well to prove it, and that's what confuses people. Because we live in a world that mistakes loudness for power. But real power doesn't roar. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't chase approval. It just is. You've become that kind of power now. Steady, calm, unreadable. Your silence has turned you into a mystery. And mystery makes people uncomfortable. They want to know what you're thinking. They want to know if you're angry, if you still care, if you've moved on. They want to understand what your silence means because they can't control it. That's the secret. Silence is ungovernable. You can't argue with it. You can't manipulate it. You can't win against it. When you went silent, you took away their favorite weapon, your reaction. You stopped giving them the satisfaction of seeing you break. And that's when they realized they no longer had power over you. You didn't announce your growth. You didn't post about it. You didn't scream it from a mountain. You just disappeared into peace. And that disappearance, the quiet evolution, as you said everything, it told them you had outgrown chaos. It told them you had stopped bleeding for people who never intended to heal. It told them that your silence wasn't about pride. It was about boundaries. You learned that silence is not punishment. It's protection. It's not running away. It's rising above. It's not ignoring. It's understanding that your attention is sacred. You now move with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to explain themselves. You let people misunderstand you because you finally understood yourself. And once you reach that point, no rumor, no gossip, no opinion can touch you because your peace no longer depends on anyone else's understanding. Your peace is self-created, self-maintained, self-owned. You've stopped performing for the world. You've stopped auditioning for love, respect, or validation. You've stopped letting noise dictate your worth. Now, your silence speaks with purpose. It says, I am no longer trying to prove I'm a good person to people who treated me like I wasn't. It says, I've learned to walk away not because I don't care, but because I finally do. About myself. You don't react anymore, not because you're numb, but because you've matured. Because you've learned that peace is not found in being right, it's found in being free. There's power in knowing you could respond, you could destroy, you could expose the truth, but you choose silence instead. That's not weakness, that's control, that's emotional mastery. You've become untouchable, not because you built walls, but because you learned discernment. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You know when to fight and when to walk away. You know that not everything deserves your fire. Now, when someone disrespects you, you don't explode. You withdraw. Because you know that peace isn't found in revenge. It's found in distance. Your silence is the proof that you've evolved. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak when it matters. And when it doesn't, you let silence speak for you. That's when the world begins to notice. Your absence becomes your statement. Your calm becomes your response. Your peace becomes your legacy. You used to beg for people to understand your heart. Now you protect it like treasure, because it is. And maybe one day, those who misunderstood your silence will realize what it truly meant, that you didn't walk away to hurt them. You walked away to heal yourself, because silence is not revenge. It's recovery. It's the return to your center after chaos tried to pull you away. And once you find that center, you never lose it again. That's what they never saw coming, that your silence wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Would you like me to continue directly with part 3, where the tone grows from quiet strength into pure power, showing how silence turns into dominance, respect, and the final moment of realization? My silence was my victory. They thought your silence meant defeat, but you knew better, because silence doesn't mean weakness. Silence means mastery. It means you've reached a place they can't touch, a space where peace is louder than noise, and stillness is stronger than any shout. You learned something few ever do. When you stop arguing with the world, you finally start hearing your soul. Every time you stayed silent, you were writing a new story, not about loss, but liberation. The day you stopped replying to chaos, you started replying to your purpose. They thought you walked away from them, but really, you walked toward yourself, and that's the greatest comeback of all, becoming so calm, so complete, that their opinions don't even echo anymore. There was a time you wanted them to understand. You rehearsed explanations in your head. You crafted messages you never sent, but silence taught you the truth. You don't owe closure to those who broke the door. You realized that growth doesn't need witnesses, it just needs time. And while they were watching, waiting for your reaction, you were busy building your rebirth. Now, look at you. You're not who you were when they left. You're quieter, yes, but stronger. Your peace doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. You don't chase respect anymore. You radiate it. Because when you learn to master silence, you master everything that tried to control you. Anger, fear, pride, pain. They all fall quiet before a soul that has healed. And when people ask what happened, you smile and say nothing. I just stopped explaining myself to noise. They expected a breakdown. You gave them evolution. They expected a cry for help. You gave them the calm of someone who doesn't need saving. They expected you to beg, but you went silent, and that silence became your greatest roar. Now, every time you choose peace over chaos, the universe takes notice. Every time you breathe instead of react, your spirit gets lighter. Every time you walk away without bitterness, you prove to yourself that peace is power. The world doesn't change when you shout louder. It changes when you become quieter, wiser, untouchable. And that's who you are now, untouchable. You built your calm like a fortress, and every brick was made from a lesson. Betrayal taught you boundaries. Pain taught you patience. Loneliness taught you self-respect. And silence. A silence taught you everything. So, let them talk. Let them guess. Let them wonder where the fire went. You didn't lose the fire. You just stopped setting yourself on fire to prove it was burning. Now your flame glows inward, steady, controlled, eternal. You don't need to prove your worth. Your peace is the proof. And when they finally realize what your silence meant, it'll already be too late, because by then you'll be too far ahead. living a life that speaks for itself. You'll have new dreams, new peace, new light, and maybe one day they'll remember the sound of your silence and understand it wasn't emptiness, it was power. Because silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of strength. It's the pause between pain and purpose, the breath between endings and beginnings, the proof that you've outgrown the noise. They expected you to beg, but you went silent, and that silence, that was your revolution. That was your healing. That was your victory, because in a world that screams to be heard, the one who stays silent is already above it.